well, I mean, they were wearing head-to-toe tactical gear in all black, and they each had at least one gun. They all just started descending on this bakery. They're like, this party's over. This is shut down. This is illegal activity.
Hi babes, Lady Silverstone here, and welcome to my podcast, where we're trying to demystify cannabis, one conversation at a time. In this episode, we're talking about how we can improve people's lives after the unjust prohibition of cannabis, having an inclusive company, and being arrested on a brunch with our guest today. She's an inspiring activist who co-created a platform for women to succeed in the cannabis industry called WomenGrow. She's also the CEO of a successful brand that is held by 80% of women and minorities. InStyle magazine included her in its Badass 50 Women list, alongside Michele Obama. Let's welcome Jane West. I hope you enjoy it. Hi there.
Hi, I'm so glad to be on the show. I was checking out everyone else you've interviewed so far, and there's such it reminded me that there's a whole world out there. So it's awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking your time to join me here. So when and how did you start Jane West? Tell us everything about that.
So being in Denver, Colorado is key to my story because this is where the first steps of significant legalization occurred in the US. And so, in 2013, I worked for an educational company. I ran programs that took kids on educational tours every summer, and also to both of Obama's inaugurations. That's what I was doing full time. And I did vote for the legalization of cannabis in the state of Colorado. We have mail-in voting in Colorado, and I was able to support those efforts, and then it passed. And adult use cannabis sales were legally going to be able to start occurring on January 1st, 2014. And it was a big deal. I mean, that month here in Colorado, in the month of January, there were news operators from all over the world. What was happening was truly historic. People were walking into a store and paying for cannabis and ordering a variety of products, and just by showing their ID. And in Colorado, Amendment 64 was also written very much in order to support small business in the state. And so, this is state-based regulation. Each state is completely different. And the way Colorado did it really protected small businesses. So we have thousands of licensees. We have hundreds of dispensary storefronts. Most of the people that started businesses in the beginning were all from the state of Colorado. And now we sit here 6 years later and have one of the most mature markets in the system, with fair pricing for customers and access to the industry. If you really wanted to start a cannabis business, you could come to Colorado and get a license and start one. And because of that, there's a lot of brands and a lot of businesses, competition, fair market competition, and we've got a lot of amazing products, so much variety for customers. It's incredible. And people come from all over the world to visit Colorado and partake in all of those products while they're here.
That's amazing. I'm so jealous, obviously, because here, you've been to Cannabis Social Club.
Yes.
It's great already for what it is, it's awesome. But it's really unfortunate because we don't have these 1-to-1 ratio strains, for example, which I really want to smoke because strong THC is just too much for me. I really like those 1-to-1 ratios, and then I really need to sit by myself, grind up some CBD, grind up some THC, mix it together, which is fine.
We actually started making a hemp blend for that purpose because people are seeking that in prohibition states, and you mix it with your cannabis, so you can kind of make that blend yourself, which is what you're doing as well. But no, you're right. It's not. And that's just the one thing that you are looking for. There's someone else. There's an 80-year-old woman looking for a topical for her knee. There's a 22-year-old girl wanting to get off anxiety medications utilizing cannabis. And then when you get into the whole array of direct, and what I speak to very much is usually to the recreational market, because I just don't drink alcohol that much. And I love cannabis and I smoke pot every day. And I think that it is part of a healthier well-being for myself. And so I definitely think people that are using our products are also using them to start replacing alcohol in their life.
Yeah.
But that being said, when you take a look at the qualifying conditions list that are now completely medically justified since, medical cannabis has been legal in is now legal in the majority of American states. It's incredible the number of ailments that people can relieve their pain and suffering with in some way or shape with cannabis.
Yeah, I think it's even that people are surprised. People that have been not necessarily anti-cannabis, but, never really wanted to, try it.
I think just like we're coming to terms with a lot of assumptions and societal norms we've had, a lot of that does apply to cannabis. And in that case, that are known as like marijuana, weed, pot, dope, like what that's meant in our society since the war on drugs really started in the 1970s. And how much that has affected our viewpoint of this product, of this plant, our viewpoint of a plant. It is a plant that grows quite well in the backyard. And, it's just a plant that we utilized as the primary reason to start this war on drugs. And people have a lot of preconceived notions about it that when, they look at that list of patient ailments and the types of people suffering that really truly see immediate, within minutes, effects of concentrated cannabis oil on those ailments, especially when it comes to seizure disorders and different types of digestive disorders, it's incredible. I mean, there are, here in the state of Colorado, we have small colonies of families where they've separated the family and the rest of the family is back wherever they are from, Alabama or a state where legalization is so far off. And if you found this product in a house, you would get your kids taken away from you.
Seriously?
Well, because it's in a really condensed format. So if you're providing a child cannabis oil therapy on a daily basis for a seizure disorder, you do need to have quite a bit of biomass on you. And so if having over an ounce of weed is a federal crime in your state, which in many states, that's not absurd, then, that would be considered a felony. Anyways, we're getting off topic. But the point is, there's a lot of families, there's so many things to talk about when it comes to cannabis, but there are many families where half the family is living here in Colorado with the child that has the ailment because they can live freely. There's other parents of children with these different seizure disorders that have also relocated to Colorado and they find a community within them. But that's just terrible. And actually right now, today in the United States, Hiller PC, a New York-based law firm that's really fighting for the people, they have the strongest argument for the removing cannabis from the list of scheduled substances that's ever been presented. And it's in some of the final stages and is being reviewed in federal court. So, and that is based on that entire law. Their argument is based on the fact that medical patients can't leave their home states. They can't travel. They can't go places because of this law. And you're saying that, cannabis has no medical properties. That's why it's able to be listed in the substances list, which is just absurd.
It's ridiculous how it comes down to such a nonsense regulation in the end. It's really, yeah. But then again, you can fly with any pills you want. That's the ridiculous thing.
Exactly. Well, and most Americans don't even realize that we're one of the only two countries in the world where pharmaceutical companies can market directly to customers. And so as Americans, we're just so used to just seeing constant commercials for Wellbutrin and Samata. Is your heart pressure high? Would you do it? It's constant. It's in the magazines, it's on the television, and it's direct to consumer marketing of pharmaceutical drugs. And no one else lets that happen. No, everyone else is your doctor can tell you what pharmaceutical drugs are out there. There's just millions and millions of dollars of advertising spent where the last sentence is, ask your doctor about this today.
It sounds really alien for me, even though I know that's the case, but it's just so hard to imagine that I would sit watching a TV program and then in the middle, in the commercials that I've seen, for me, that is what?
There's so many people moving away from direct-to-consumer advertising at all in this manner, and they've really taken those airwaves. The people who are sad and there's a cloud over them, and then the pill then like they're running in the yard in the grass. Also weed could also do these.
Are you able to do it?
No, that's what there's a pretty long list of those ads where in the middle the person could just like smoke a joint and the end would still be them like running around in the grass and being cannabis. But no, you're not. That's a massive issue in the cannabis industry, is the fact that there's so many restrictions to advertising. There's suppression of social media. The hashtag follow that is end the canna ban. People's accounts are shut down on the regular. Willie Nelson has had his account shut down. It's like nobody's, free of it. And then it also does greatly restrict your ability to provide correct information to consumers, because you can't really speak directly to them unless they're basically in a dispensary. But once you get the customer into the dispensary experience, then your goal is to kind of like get them to buy and get them out. Like we're running a business here. So a lot of customers kind of get left with a lack of information.
That's really too bad. And yeah, that's why it's really needed for a lot of, I don't know, but accounts where you get the information and not only, I mean, there's a lot of beautiful claims, that, oh yeah, cannabis can do this and it can do that and blah, 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 just like these pharmaceutical brands do as well, Right. And I think that it's very important that also those things are not controlled, but yes, in a way. I mean, I want people to be able to know both the risks and the benefits, obviously. It's very important.
Of course. Oh, definitely. And I mean, combusting cannabis and smoking joints like I enjoy to do is definitely not the healthiest uptake method when there are so many others in terms of edibles or a tincture or topicals. I just like to.
It's just not the same feeling.
But it's important to know it's not the same feeling. Nope. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like smoking flower. That's it. I think it's just part of like the herbal aspect of inhaling the plant. And that's the reason I am so confident that, because everything I do is for flower lovers and flower consumers like me.
Yeah, not liquid.
Yeah, not liquid, not vaping, not those things. There is a taboo around smoking in terms of combusting and inhaling. And actually, well, with you being in Europe, there's very few people that smoke in my neighborhood or around Denver, Colorado right now, in my opinion, from what I see. Like, it's just not that common. Like when I smell it now, I am detected. I'm like, oh, I smell a cigarette. It's such a distinct smell. When I was in Barcelona for Cannabis, and it was notable to me, but I know it's a metro city but there was a lot more people smoking. But I think there is like a mentality around smoking that is connected to the chemicals and nicotine in products that cannabis gets a bad rap for. But
yeah.
Once you start actually inhaling, I'm confident that people who start trying cannabis in small baby steps with edibles or vape pens will then build a confidence and turn to flower, because ultimately it still is the fastest, most reliable way to get the same effects like immediately. So, but you just need to build up that confidence. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier about the need for education. Like this is a psychoactive drug. And so I believe strongly that like the more educated the consumer is and the more confident they are in the product they're taking, the less fear and anxiety will be attached to it. And they'll like more enjoy the experience.
Totally. Because I do think that a lot of the anxiety that people say that, I feel paranoid and stuff. I do think a lot of it has to do with either that you feel that like, oh my God, can the police come and knock on my door?
Yeah, no, totally. It's illegal. It's absolutely connected to the illegality of the substance. Absolutely. And even if they're not worried about that, they're worried about the neighbor, or,
Exactly. Yes.
That's why I usually tell people for some of their first sessions to like get it set up with something you're going to do that you're already good at doing and you enjoy doing, but you could maybe even do mindlessly, like drawing or like maybe painting or gardening, and then get yourself all set up to do it and then partake and enjoy and then do something you enjoy doing. And like, because something about like, I think some of those anxiety experiences, usually when like the person's like sitting in a room alone or something, you're like, well, okay.
Sorry for interrupting. I hope you enjoy listening so far. Please check out my account Lady Silverstone at patreon.com so I can continue creating cannabis content for you. You're so Right, because I do think that like set and setting is something that we're not very used to, because we are so used to that when it comes to alcohol. Like it's as if we don't care, because our first time we got super drunk, it was at a party where we knew maybe 3 people, and we were like, that was fine, so I can just, you know, it's not. And I would never smoke at a party. Like I would never tell a friend that is at a party who wants to try cannabis the first time. I would say like, no, let's meet up one of these coming days and like let's make some tea and let's chill at yours or whatever, you know. So I think that is really important as well for the first timers.
I totally agree.
So I want to hear about your SWAT experience in 2014. Tell us everything. Like, how did it start? Everything.
Where we were at was, so Colorado legalized cannabis on January 1st, 2014. I decided, so I have my master's degree in social work, and I've been working for an education company. But I did want to do something, you know, a little more vice oriented with the legalization of cannabis happening in the city I was living in.
Yeah.
So I launched a company called Edible Events. And the goal was to have once a month events that were cannabis friendly. So we had a smoking lounge out front that was all like, it was part of a shuttle bus, actually. To do it legally, we had to have all the consumption occur on a bus.
What?
So it's all the rules are so crazy. This is going to get too long. Okay, I need to be brief. Okay, so my goal was to show the world that cannabis consumption events can be safely attended by adults and enjoyed and should be part of our lives. That was my goal. And in order to really do it right without having the city shut me down, I had to follow a long list of bizarre rules, including like putting these giant posters up in the windows in advance to tell people this was about to happen, including using plastic to cover the fence of the art gallery so no one could possibly see people smoking pot, minors.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And one of the things was that we had to have a bus where, and that's where people smoked. So we would transform the inside of this large party bus into like a train car. And all along the middle of the train car, we had these ashtrays and stuff. And that's where you went to smoke. And then you got off the bus and then you'd attend the party, which is at the art gallery. And so I found an art gallery owner that was totally down with the idea. I rented the bus company. I got insurance from Lloyd's of London. I hired the staff. And so we started selling tickets to these events. And the first one went extremely well. There's a feature on the UK Telegraph still of the piece that we can put a link to this and people can watch it because it's so fun. Oh my God, there's like people that drove in from Oklahoma. Everyone was so excited to be there. It's the end of Prohibition party. So the first party went off amazingly well. I got a ton of press and people were really excited about it. The second party happened. It was called a threesome with Mary Jane. It was on Valentine's night. It was awesome. Then I started getting like calls from the city and calls from people that it started to seem like they were like, well, we don't know if this is completely legal. You're profiting from the consumption of cannabis, which might be illegal, and we're looking into it. And I, by the way, was not selling. There's nothing for sale at the party. You bring your own cannabis. Everyone brings their own stuff, right? And enjoys it. So by March, the party was all Asian themed, and the director of the Colorado Symphony Orchestra came and thought that this might be a really wonderful idea for the symphony to do, and as like a fundraiser. And so I looked to think that, okay, well, if the city is trying to stop these events because they believe I'm profiting from them, then I will turn them into fundraisers and all of the funds will go to the Colorado Symphony Orchestra as a nonprofit. And so that kind of took away their argument against why I couldn't keep hosting these events. So then we announced that the Colorado Symphony Orchestra is doing weed-friendly events. The New York Times wrote about it. It was on CBS this morning. We planned an event at Red Rocks, which if you do not know, Red Rocks is a historic outdoor amphitheater built into the rock of Colorado. And it was called On a High Note, and we sold 5,000 tickets.
Wow.
And the whole symphony played, and it was sponsored by cannabis companies who supported the local arts. It was like everything I was trying to do. So the city they were watching me like a hawk, and they did not want these events to happen in any way, shape, or form. And so I kept having them underground. And so in April, we had a 420 Wake and Bacon brunch. And it was at a small female-owned bakery, and she was just making baking goods and putting them out on trays, and everything was available.
Nice.
Like that was like the setup for the brunch. And then additionally, we had a little mimosa bar and these like different like bacon and egg things over on this other side. It was amazing. It was called Wake and Bacon Brunch. It happened to be on Easter Sunday. And it was 420. So it was my big 420 event. And it was like 11:30 in the morning, and people like all dressed up. And this guy comes in, and I didn't recognize him. He asked me, he gave me his ticket. I checked his ID. And then he came into the event and he asked for a drink. And then he like came up to me and confirmed that I was who I was. I was like, and I thought he was like a reporter. And then he like talked into his like lapel for a sec. And then 8 people, SWAT team members, well, I mean, they were wearing head to toe tactical gear in all black, and they each had at least one gun. All just started descending on this bakery. There was this couple from New Jersey in the corner that like, they were like ghost white. Like what, no one knew what was happening. Like what is going to happen to me? What is going to happen? Like, and people dispersed. I mean, it wasn't like people were like running out the door, but like everyone was gathering their things to try to see if they would be allowed to leave. And they were allowed to leave. So like, they're like, this party's over. This is shut down. This is illegal activity. And like, so people started gathering their things. They started leaving. Like I called my lawyer immediately, and was on the phone with the lawyer. They were recording everything, because now I've seen all the criminal justice stuff, and like they recorded everything, confiscated the champagne, which is what they ended up bringing me up on criminal charges for. Ugh. Their goal was to make me a criminal. Their goal was to make my activity criminal so that I had to be on probation. And therefore, once I'm on probation, anything I did that wasn't in line, even though it might not be totally illegal, I could go to jail for it. That was their goal. And they did. I mean, I had to, that's exactly what happened. So, so that was in April that was only 4 months into starting the business.
Oh my God.
And, but honestly, you know, and this is actually appropriate to some of the other topics that we might come to today, but that really was the most like not terrifying. It was terrifying, but also there were all these other moments during the process of going through the criminal justice system. I was not arrested that day, I want to be clear, but I mean, I was left with all these tickets and all these misdemeanor charges and all these criminal notes and records and court dates. And now from this point forward, unless I decide to go through the expungement process, I have a criminal misdemeanor charges, which I have to report on like every single document, and, or like a job application or an application for, I mean, the list of things that you have to list, whether or not you have criminal records for, is quite actually, in my opinion now, absurd, and really tuned me in at an early time that I definitely needed it, on like how racist the war on drugs is and how arbitrary our enforcement of laws in this country are, and what is, and so like I had to go to a court like 6 different times because of that. And there was never another white lady sitting there in that courtroom. And everyone else there was there for the same type of like low level crime that I now have on my record, and that is affecting things I do to this day. And, you know, these are just young kids. And so Colorado and Denver is majority white. And so the fact that there weren't other white people in the courtrooms 6 times while I was there, just like, and I also, you know, I was fearful. I didn't know what was going to happen. And there were people at that time that believed that they might try to really make an example out of me, so no one else tries to start doing this. And so I had a lot of fear in that. And I really I felt that in the faces and demeanors of the other people who were considered, you know, criminal, who were there to be seen in court. And it really did affect the way I look at things in the space.
Oh, I can imagine. Because you had never been in that kind of situation at all before, obviously.
No, right, yeah. Right. Exactly. I mean, when I get pulled, I'm a white woman in America, and if I were to get pulled over, I wouldn't have that like heart racing fear that other people in this country have every right to have because of the systemic racism here. So no, absolutely. I had never quite felt that way. And there was also a lot of like shame involved in it, which I also was like failing. Like right now, sitting here at this point, looking back, I can make it seem like it was all part of this story. But at the time, so two other things occurred. So I also got fired from my job because of this, because then it was in the press so much from the whole thing. And what I did for my job was work with high school students.
Were you in like papers and stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
The cops showing up was in the paper. Then getting fired from my corporate job because of the cannabis events, that was on the cover of the Post, which means it ran on like the ticker on the side of the building for the whole day. And because people needed to know, people were racing into the cannabis industry in 2014, and as they are today, starting ancillary businesses that they believed, like were legal. And, they were starting to put down, barriers in the sign that they were thinking these businesses weren't legal, in fact. And I was their example.
So what did they actually charge you with?
Okay, well, what they were able to charge me with that I could not deny and had to plead guilty to was that there was alcohol being served. But in the United States, in like nail salons, or art galleries and other places, like you can go in on a Friday night and they'll have like glasses of wine there. Those places do not get liquor licenses. Additionally, fundraisers for schools and all these different events, they serve liquor and they do not have liquor licenses. At this particular event, we had a mimosa bar and I was serving mimosas to my guests. And so they are able to make a misdemeanor charge for the public sale of alcohol, which I would have argued is not public because they all bought tickets and you can't get in unless I check your ID. But fine, that's not my place. It's not my place. But for the public distribution of alcohol, that is what my charge was for the mimosa bottle. They really thought that they were going to find weed, I believe. I believe they really thought they were going to walk in and find like a weed bar that you walked up to where I was giving away cannabis, I never did anything like that. It was all about the food and the art. And, so when they didn't, they were like, well, we got this mimosa bottle, I guess. Just, it all is ridiculous. It's the smallest thing for me to complain about because some of the arbitrary reasons that people are in jail for mandatory minimums are so absurd. It's the saddest thing. It's the saddest stories over and over again. But yes, it was all in the paper and all in the things, all the news, all the things. And so that is what really put my name into the cannabis industry on a global level, and why women in particular started reaching out to me from all over the world. Like, how do I get in the cannabis industry? I want your job. I want to start your business. Can I franchise your business? I was like, I do not know. I don't know what I'm doing. My company is illegal. I think I'm a criminal now. I was fired from my job. You should not ask me for advice. But I was also like, okay, the one thing I had figured out after my first 6 months in the cannabis industry was that like the state specific nature of what was about to occur in the US had to be the first consideration for starting anything you do. Because we had like basically all societally agreed, okay, even though no one's even written this down on paper yet, every state's just going to start deciding on their own. Their voters can decide what this looks like. And the feds, the federal government, isn't going to come in and do anything about it. So whatever the regulations in your individual state look like, completely determine what the sector ends up being.
Yeah, okay.
How many licenses are issued? For what ailments, what products, can you have colors, can you have logos, like when is your store open, where are the stores located? These are all regs, state-based. So because of that, I had learned that, and that's a very important factor, and it still remains a critical factor today. So people were reaching out to me. I knew state-based was important, and my answer was to create a networking group that I called WomenGrow. And so 6 months into the cannabis industry, that by then, like the SWAT team thing had happened. It was clear that once our last Symphony event occurred in September, I was not going to be able to host more events. And so I needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do, because I don't have a job anymore. And so I founded WomenGrow. I had the first event in August of 2014, and about 80 women came. And the goal was to continue to host monthly networking events build women's networks and anyone that wants to be in the cannabis industry, like the WomenGrow network, at least the last time I checked, it is like 35% men, like really smart men.
Yeah.
In the cannabis industry. And so WomenGrow networks and chat and markets popped up all over the country. And we had people launch them in different cities in different states, because then they can support each other within those states and get to know the representatives and the laws and the licensing and the application process and start to get connected with other women there.
That's amazing. In how many states do you have WomenGrow?
It's like constantly transforming. And because we really kept it something that would be accessible, and also allowed for each market to really build it into whatever works best for that market. So I know over the course of time, we've been in about 50 cities. I know that almost 250,000 people have attended WomenGrow events since it started. We have an annual conference that used to be held in Denver. Now it's held in DC. And our Instagram following at WomenGrow, it's all organic. I mean, people have just followed us over the past 6 years, and now we're up to over 200,000.
Oh, wow. That's great. Happy to see how amazingly it has grown.
Yes. And there's so many other, that was just the first women's group. There's so many others. And whether it's like Latinas in cannabis or groups that form around other like very specific women needs, like Canna moms, like the mothers of children who use cannabis, or different groups that have sprung up about like utilizing cannabis throughout menopause. Like it's just one of hundreds of awesome women's groups around cannabis you can find out there. Because I think if you have a desire to connect with other people around cannabis, there's probably other people you can find that way. You just have to kind of send that signal out there and find them.
Yeah, totally. And that's what is so amazing already, that you have, as you're going through all these things, and like you said, that all the states have their own laws and regulations. People really need these groups. People really need to be able to like communicate and meet each other and ask for advice, and on so many levels.
Yeah, and it's more critical than ever. Like, and I've actually spent more time in the past couple of weeks taking a look at how cannabis legalization has in fact occurred over the past 6 years on a national level. At this point, and what I'm seeing right now, very serious inequity that needs to be addressed immediately. And I didn't realize quite how bad it was. And I hope that the current changes in thinking that are occurring in the US can affect change immediately in terms of cannabis licensing, because what has occurred is not fair and it is straight up unjust. We should talk about that more, because I hope that other countries and states that are still prohibition do take a look at the society. This is a social justice issue. The legalization of cannabis is a social justice issue.
It definitely is.
Yeah, it's economic. So right now, so just as a quick sidebar to explain where my opinion or expertise comes from. So I divested the majority of my interest in WomenGrow in 2016 and left it for the future employees, and then created a structure that kind of like grandmothered me out of the organization. I was the chair for a while, and now I'm just get to go do my own things and leave it to the next generation to take. And so for the past 3 years, I've been building my own brand around for flower lovers like me. And I have a glassware line, and I also have a line of dugouts and one-hitters, there are not enough dugouts and one-hitters in Europe. So I attended Cannabis in Prague and also Cannabis in Barcelona, and I make dugouts and one-hitters for women, and a really awesome one for guys called the Classic.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. And people didn't even know that this was a thing. I couldn't even find one-hitters. And then maybe one person had one of those like old wooden ones where the one-hitter looks like a cigarette. And so I really I believe I know right now we sell through Grass City, which distributes throughout Europe. But I think one-hitters are going to hit the European market here soon, because, it's really one of the best ways to conserve your flower. When you have a one hitter, if you have a 1 gram joint, you can fill a one hitter with it 20 times.
Okay.
And it really like has that like measured experience where you're putting the same amount of flower in this chamber and inhaling it and exhaling it and enjoying it. And then doing that again, maybe in, I don't know, 5 minutes. But when you light a joint, you know, that's, you're smoking that joint. And that's the way I feel about it. I don't like putting out joints and relighting them, really. That's why all my mini joints are tiny. So number one, dug out some one hitters. There should be more of them in Europe. And number two, so I started building a company for flower lovers. And so right now we have partners in 10 states that I know, like, and trust. I've visited their grows, their businesses. I try my best to find minority-owned businesses to partner with. I'm trying to build my own business in the way that I wish I saw other cannabis businesses doing it. And instead of just complaining, I'm just going to do it exactly the way I think it should be done and to show everyone it's possible. So my company is 80% held by women and people of color. We also have done 2 equity crowdfunding rounds, which allows accessibility to invest in cannabis, and they really have a stake in the company. And so using the Republic platform twice now, we were on the Republic platform twice, and now we have 2,500 investors from 42 countries and every single US state.
Oh, wow.
Like, it's really allowed access to the brand. And so they really own a stake in my company. I really care about finding the right partners in those states and about the social justice aspect of the cannabis industry and how I want to try my best to fix that through the way I build the company. And so a year and a half ago, I started looking around the US for partners to grow my flower. And then we brand it. So basically I look at all the flower they're growing, and we try a bunch of it out. And then I pick some sativas for day and some indicas for night, because I'm trying to simplify the customer buying experience. And strain names don't mean anything. In fact, sativa and indica really don't mean anything because there's no like standard that you can check back to make sure it is what you say it is. So instead, I provide that expertise. I select my day and night, and then we just sell it into the market as day and night. And so I'm helping my partners sell their own flower that I love. And I'm helping my customers know, like, hey, these are great people. I love like their flower. I've met with them. I trust their product. If I lived here, this is where I would come shop. And those partnerships grow from there. 18 months ago, I started looking around the country for these partners, and I found 10 of them. And I love my partners, but one of the things that happened on the journey was I went to states so here in Colorado, we had close to unlimited licensing. If you want to start a cannabis brand, you can go start one. But so we have thousands of businesses that are licensed. And while I was building my businesses, legalization occurred in the majority of American states. When we started, it was just us in Colorado. And what's happened is not fair and not right. And that's what I'm only coming to start to learn. So in places like Illinois, there are less than 20 licenses that have been issued. From what I can tell, the entire sector is 100% Caucasian male owned. And there's a very similar story in Maryland, Massachusetts, Florida, and Ohio. And so as I went state by state, and I was like, hey, as you know, I built WomenGrow. I have a vast network. I'm like, hey, let's see what's going on in Missouri. Let's call our people in Missouri. Let's see So Missouri, yeah, they just passed legalization. People are starting getting licenses. It seems pretty fair. There's lots of licenses being issued. I'm like, okay, I'll check back in a couple months. When I started checking in on Illinois, they were like, well, there's really no minority licenses here right now. They're going to do that next year.
Why? Yeah.
I was like, well, that seems remarkably. I know, no, there's always a reason. See, that's the thing. There's always reasons, and the reasons are always so subtle that you're not quite sure what to do. And honestly, I don't have a place within each of these markets to start trying to figure that out. My goal was to just come back to these markets 6 months later and see what's changed. And so in the past month, I've gone back to some of those markets, and it still has seen no change.
That's crazy.
It is. And I think it's something that we have to start talking about in the US, because there is a vast inequity right now at this moment in who has received the licenses to grow and sell cannabis, which again is a plant that the barriers to entry that have put in place are arbitrary, and they're specific to making sure that, not making sure, but just they ensure that people who do not traditionally have access to capital have absolutely no way to play in the market. And here in Colorado, 6 years ago, the hundreds of people that received licenses, they didn't have access to vast amounts of capital. They couldn't even get banking. It all happened in cash, and they still made it work. And those businesses still exist. And you know what? If they don't, they were bought out. So at least like a natively owned business, like grew it as much as they could for 4 years and then had some type of an exit and were bought out by a bigger company. But they at least had the opportunity to participate. What I've seen in these other states, and what I want customers to understand, and what I am going to, like this past month in the US has brought so many things to the surface. And then that happening in conjunction with me becoming more aware of how inequitable some of the states have applied regulations, while people still sit in jail in Illinois for cannabis-related offenses. It's become more obvious. And so as a company, I'm working closely with several minority group leaders to ensure that my messaging and what we do to affect change is supportive of their efforts. And that takes time, but we are going to start issuing like bi-weekly statements about some of the things that we're learning in just a very factual way, so that customers themselves can ask more questions about who's growing their cannabis and what access to markets looks like. Because ultimately, now that I'm all the way down this road, this is starting to become almost an antitrust issue. Because what I've seen, the reason the customers in Illinois are fooled into thinking that they have choice and variety and access is because what is happening now in states that are that tightly controlled by so few is it's basically like a monopoly, or an oligopoly. It's very few people controlling all access to something that no one else has the right to grow, sell, or distribute. And when it's that tightly controlled, they can also control the market pricing, and they can launch brands, multiple brands, a brownie company named Mindy's Brownies, and this other drip, and this other company, and this other company. They can launch tons of brands and companies because there's no competition, and you're going to get traction. And you're going to get traction because they only open so many stores that there's always demand. So and now, for the first time, several of these businesses are turning profitable. So within 6 years of legalization, a small group of wealthy Caucasian men figured out a way to turn a company into being profitable while people still sit in jail for doing the same type of cannabis distribution that they are doing. And it's not okay. And it's not okay. Here's the thing. It's okay that it's just business. I'm not saying that anyone should be restricted in what they do in business. I'm actually saying the opposite. I'm saying no one should be restricted in playing this game and being able to have access to opportunity in the market. And that's what I'm saying. Everybody go. Like, there should be 12 brownie companies competing for the Illinois market. Go, do it. Let's see who's best. And that's how customers and patients end up getting the most access to the highest quality products with brands and companies that really care about keeping you as a customer. Right now, with the limited system and customers having no other choice, they don't need to really care. When there's not anywhere else to go. The fact that we still are at least like 40, due to somewhat of a clerical error, because I did dig deeper in Illinois, and I'm going to keep digging deeper until I'm going to keep digging into these states until I have a minority partner that I could possibly license with. I'm not saying I definitely will, but I'm not going to bring my band to states that are just 100% Caucasian held, and I'm going to keep highlighting them until I have a choice. Because customers should have a choice too. And women and minorities who are cannabis customers in the state of Illinois should know where every single one of their dollars is going. And they should have a choice to buy from people that reflect, their culture and values.
Yeah, totally. Already it's obviously overwhelming in so many ways.
So much. Every morning I just wake up. I started this business in 2014.
Waking up, no. Yeah.
And every morning I just wake up and there's something new to like keep your heart racing or keep you activated.
Yeah. Dear listeners, if you like what you hear, please check out my Patreon. The link is in the description here below. Only if you're able to, of course. Now, let's get back to our guest. I do feel that I talked to that with a friend today. I'm like, 2020, initially, everyone was like, oh my God, what is this year of, hell? Can't we just cancel 2020, I do feel that like 2020 is going to be the most important year that we all going to remember with such, this is it.
I agree. And I am motivated to seek change specifically in the cannabis industry to opportunity to participate because there are so many systemic injustices that are hard to fix. The reason people aren't like diving in is because there's so many layers and it's so complicated and deep. But when it comes to this one thing, this one industry, this one reason that Black communities in America have been decimated for 30 years.
Yeah.
Like this one thing you could change with a pen to paper tomorrow. Tomorrow, the governor of the state of Illinois could be like, nope, I've taken a look at the system and it seems pretty unfair. And so we are going to start issuing minority licenses immediately until there's no longer a disparity. It's that simple because it's so brand new. And that's what keeps me excited about the ability to be a force for change. And that's before you even start talking about the tax dollars we could make off of it.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Of course. But like you say, it's so new. You can shape this any way that we want and any way we need it to be. I think that that's the thing, like only people like us, right, that are in the industry understands the whole scope of it. I mean, this goes back, like you say, this goes back even before. I mean, we can read already in like the mid 19th century. I mean, there has always been racism and drugs work together to push people that is able to either steal your jobs according to whoever is issuing these laws. And that is really like you say, it's coming up now to the surface and we can really make a huge change.
I agree. I mean, advocates for cannabis legalization and the legalization of drugs in general have always said that the war on drugs is really just a war on people. And that it has become so starkly true, especially when you look at the fact that, we imprisoned generations of Black men in the US under the shared societal agreement that cannabis is bad for the neighborhood. Cannabis is bad for your community. This is bad. It's a gateway drug. And like we know now, based on public health data and actual data extensively collected for the past 6 years in the state of Colorado, that is not true. And that housing prices in your dispensaries go up and and consumption of pharmaceutical drugs and liquor goes down and people's well-being is like the roads are just as safe, all these elements. And so we know now that cannabis does not decimate communities. What decimated communities was the effects of police and the criminal justice system on Black communities for drugs. Like it's so starkly obvious now. So there's lots to do.
Babe, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, and it's also so inspiring to hear it from you you are there, you're on the spot and you're seeing everything. Like you said, you're the one that is calling up these people and actually talking to them and visiting these places as well. I mean, I don't know anyone that has done that, I have no access to those people. So it's really important that comes out. And for people to just see that.
And it all keeps trailing into the mission I have to find my partners. So like, as I go into each state to try to find that partner, you have to learn what's happening there and you become, it all seems clear, this tapestry that's forming. So it's so fascinating. And I hope that people I hope we're able to pick out a few of these states and highlight the inequity of what was created, whether intentionally or not, so that it's just never replicated.
Yeah.
so that people are just talking about this from the beginning.
Yeah. And I hope that like after we set, like this amazing standard within the cannabis business, that other businesses that already been here for hundreds of years, but that they follow.
And also what I hope also is that like I have learned, or at least I believe now, that there are some things that aren't worth changing. Like the idealism I had of going into things like financial markets or other places where I'm like, I'm going to convince them. Like if the system is based on so much inequity, it might not be the best system for you. This is like an example why we switched to this equity crowdfunding, something different than getting a check written to you to fund your company, right? So I hope additionally, like what you had just said, that the effects of the cannabis industry, once we start pushing for social justice in a more and real change in a real way, affects future industries.
Yeah.
Future, like, we'll keep evolving as a world, and there'll be future industries we haven't even envisioned yet a decade from now.
Yeah.
And I want them to look at the cannabis industry, but see, like, if you start it right and you have diverse foundation to your new sector, your new, whatever the new thing is, that it can, really seep through and you'll really see diversity throughout.
I do see that, again, like I said, 2020, it is changing. I think it changes a lot of people's mindset. And I hope that, like you say, after this, everything that is going to come in a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, is going to be so different from everything that we're used to. This normal that we have, everything that we're used to, all this system that we're so... I mean, we just work on it we don't even have to think about it. Everything is just around us. We are working like rats in it, which is scary.
It is scary. It is scary. When I first lived in New York and when I traveled throughout Europe, I didn't have a cell phone. It's amazing how quickly we become dependent on systems we create ourselves. And so if that makes me hopeful that we can create new systems too. It's got to happen. I mean, I'm just so confident that we're on the right side of history when it comes to cannabis legalization. Like, there's just so many of the thoughts and feelings people have about it that are critical are uneducated thoughts, actually. And so once people see it for what it is, and they're like, I thought this, or I thought that, or I thought I'd be like drooling in the corner. So you're like,
yes, exactly.
Like that. Like, I feel great. It's so, that kind of a change in thinking is immediate because it was based on an uneducated belief they had. So that motivates me, because the more people that are being benefited from this, the more people will talk about it, and change of the thoughts will happen quickly, especially with the next gen. 20-year-olds in the US are like, weed's not even cool.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That is nice to see as well. I mean, they are so both open-minded. They don't have these blockages that people that maybe grew up before the 90s or the millennia have, right? Which is, it's refreshing. It's nice to see. Definitely. So I have a last question. What did the people around you, let's say your husband, your closest friends, your family, your parents, what did they say when you started your cannabis journey?
My husband is not a regular consumer because the sector that he works in still doesn't permit it. So at the very beginning, it was challenging because he wasn't necessarily benefiting from all of this. I mean, I got fired, and then my business wasn't working, and then it's been years to get to where we are now, and so he was always just very supportive in terms of taking care of the children and helping me in having to completely change my life and alter it. Now, my parents, they live in Denver, Colorado. They've been super supportive. They watch my kids a lot when I was building up my business, because I had to, we've been talking about this. I have to travel. And when I travel, I have to leave for blocks of time and really go to a city and get to know it. And so, they've always been super supportive. My dad is a regular consumer. He has a German engineered vaporizer that I got him for Christmas one year that he has on himself all the time. My mom doesn't partake as much, but she's supportive as well. I mean, overall, I have a feeling there are some individuals in my network that aren't too keen about it. And over time, I've noticed there's definitely a shift in people that entered my life and people that exited my life. And that's okay. That's okay. That happens. And I just keep kind of moving forward. Honestly, I think one of the things that's changed the most for me is that like, I'm just so dedicated to building this business, and I'm so lucky to have it be such a key part of my life, and that my family is in fact supportive of it, because it really is an opportunity. Like prior to getting fired, I never considered myself a CEO or an entrepreneur or anything. I mean, I consider myself the best employee wherever I was working, or not the best, but just like I wanted to be a very good employee and get a job at a good place doing good things. But I wasn't like, I'm going to go off on my own and do all this shit. So I think the biggest change has been that like I now have this entire thing that is very time consuming, and as just from all the topics we even talked about on the, just today, like not passion generating, where you want to fix it, you want to work on it. And so that those have been some of the biggest changes that my family has had to adapt to. Everyone knows I love pot, and I've always had pot run. Yeah, like everyone always knew that about me. I was never like, I was always fairly unabashed about that, but I've never been like, I've always been pretty like unashamed of my cannabis consumption.
Dude, that's exciting. I can't wait until, maybe in a year or so, talking to you again here and just see like where you are.
Yes, you have to come to Colorado. Will you come to, you have any plans or to come to when have you visited a legal state?
I haven't.
No. Okay, cool. Have you come? Oh, you have to come. Do you have any plans to come to the US?
Not yet. My best friend lives in New York, and I know that's very far from Colorado, but I would love to. I mean, I would love to. I think it would be very educational in so many ways. I mean, the US is just, it's a thing in its own, right? It's its own like organ, just like there's so many things going on over there, and so different as well. Like from like my perspective, just living in one country where like states have their own regulations, that is like, how does that work, Yeah. It's amazing that it works in a way, but there's also many things that doesn't work.
Definitely. Well, the problem is, when I feel like one of the issues we're learning is that like it's hard to track what's happening when so many things are happening in a different way. If you visit your friend in New York, there are places to go, but it's not rec yet. But you could go. There are recreational stores open throughout Massachusetts. That would be, I think, the closest spot. I have partners in Massachusetts. They're actually the fourth largest LGBTQ owned business in Massachusetts, and one of the only diversely and family owned. They're the only license that's in Massachusetts. It's like still 100% family owned, but
oh, that's amazing.
So there are places you can go in Massachusetts if that you can just walk right into a store and pick out a thing.
Cool. I will definitely contact you. That's for sure. And when is your next Spain trip then?
Oh, I wish. I don't know. I want to travel so bad. I really do. I really do. I will consider Cannabis. I know you'll be there. I'm sure. I am hopeful that by next March, Cannabis will occur in some way.
Yeah.
So that's something I would definitely consider again. It was quite a gathering of really people super dedicated to cannabis.
No, unfortunately, but it's growing slowly but surely.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to meet you one day. It's going to be really nice.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Thank you for taking time talking to me. It was super inspiring to hear about your journey and everything that is, just in your head and in your journey and path. It's awesome to hear.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Have a really good day and talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to my social channels and rate this podcast. And if you would like to support me a little bit extra, it would really mean the world to me. So check out my Patreon profile that I linked in the episode description. It's all thanks to your support that I can continue talking, writing, recording, and making more cannabis content for you and our amazing community. Have an awesome day and lots of love.